Tonight, we're talking about why it's important for people to stay politically aware and politically active, even when it's not a presidential election going on. Live from the Burbs starts now. Happy Saturday evening to everyone.
Hello.
Greetings to the world and everyone in the sound of the listening radius of my voice. It's the Mr. and Mrs. coming to you live on a Saturday. And what an evening it is. So when we originally planned this episode, we had no idea that Saturday, 5 days
5 days
after the U.S. presidential elections, that we would just now, tonight, be learning who actually won. And the votes are in, the tallies are up, and hey, what are your thoughts?
It was a close race. You're gonna ask me what my thoughts are. It was a close race. I'm surprised. I mean, for me to say I wasn't surprised, I am surprised, but definitely glad Joe won. But definitely, it was such a neck and neck race. I was nervous the whole way. I don't know about you, but I definitely was.
We never quite experienced anything like that in life. I mean, I used to, remember growing up, you knew who won the night of, or at least allegedly who won the night of. Even if there was like some dimples and chads to be counted in Florida or whatever. But hanging in suspense for this many days,
definitely
is a nail biter.
Yes,
nail biter for sure. But tonight, we have a couple of guests who are going to talk to us a little bit about what just went down and talk to us about what people need to do in between these kind of Super Bowls of political life. Every 4 years, everybody crawls out of everywhere to vote for a president, but in the United States anyway, respect to all and shouts to all of our international listeners. But that every 4 years, then we go back into our corners and think, okay, life is life. But there's other things that need to happen that determine how you're going to live and how politics influence your life.
In between time. But we do want to say thanks to everyone for going out and voting. It was a record-breaking, phenomenal act that happened this election. So many ballots were counted. So many. Oh my gosh, it's mind blowing.
A lot of people got out there.
I'm proud of my country right now. I'm really like we made a change, and we felt like it. We felt like we did something. So that's awesome. I'm happy.
And with that, we're going to bring on our guest for the evening. First gentleman is an attorney, host of the Jamal Show on WKND in Hartford, Connecticut. Good friend of mine, Jamal.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me. I appreciate being here. And somebody else. Yeah.
We're going to bring on the guest on. Another guest joining us on the virtual couch tonight is a professor of political science and African American studies at Winthrop University. Another good friend of mine, Dr. Adolphus Belk. Dr. Belk, welcome to the program.
Welcome.
Thanks for having me, good people.
And a good evening to you.
Same. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I was saying, when we first planned this episode, and we said, okay, Saturday night, we're going to get some people together and talk politics. Nowhere in our wildest imaginations did we think that we would just now be figuring out what all happened Tuesday. So let's start with that. What exactly did we witness this week? Doctor, I'll start with you.
I'm teaching virtually this semester. We're working in a combination of online, hybrid, and all these other things because of the coronavirus pandemic. I told my students in our last virtual meetup that they shouldn't expect the outcome to be determined on the night of the election. That it was going to be too close a race. There were a lot of polls, especially in tight states or battleground states, where the results were inside the margin of error, meaning that it was a toss-up and you really wouldn't be able to determine the outcome until people actually got to participate and vote. The thing that complicated it even more was that because of the coronavirus pandemic, you had millions of people participating early through mail-in ballots or absentee in-person voting for weeks ahead of the actual election day. So all of that meant that it wasn't going to be likely that we'd know who won on the evening of the contest. But it's still better than 2000, where people didn't find out until the Supreme Court made a decision on December 12th. We've seen worse.
True. Yes, we have.
Let me just say,
Jamal,
if I can just add in, I think that this day is really important for what it avoided, even more than what we've gotten as far as in a presidential candidate or presidential-elect Joe Biden. Yeah, I've always liked Joe Biden. He's always had good support in the Black community. But I think that the greater ill of the world was at stake here. We're talking about I'm not even talking about the imprisoning of kids and all the other stuff. I'm just talking about the breakdown of institutions that we all need, that we all rely on. These are things that we rely on. You know what I'm saying? You rely on the justice system to not look at you a certain way and not penalize you for the way you look and stuff like that. And this is a man who championed that kind of stuff. So we really avoided a bullet here. You know what I'm saying? And if he had gotten reelected again, it would have symbolized so much and a loss of hope for minorities and so many people that are the other to this man. So I'm just so happy for what we avoided. Do you know what I'm saying? And yeah, it was going to take a long time. I think that we've had elections that have taken a couple of days before. I lived through the Al Gore thing with George W. Bush. I think that this was, I don't know if this was as close. Yeah, in the end, I don't know if we'll be saying this is as close as it felt like, because I think he's going to get like 306 electoral votes. So, but I'm still very, very, and I'll leave it at this. I'm still very, very disconcerted with how many votes this man got. And that's something that we're going to have to deal with on the back end. But let me just tell you, 53% of white women voted for him the first time. 55% of white women voted for him this time. All right? And these are people that we see in the street that we call friends and neighbors. So we got a lot of fixing to do. That's all. I'll leave it at that for now.
Absolutely. I agree. Obviously, there's still there's a lot of people who did not want him to leave office, and we definitely need to address that and to deal with how they're feeling. And hopefully we can also resolve this and try to bring our nation together, because there's obviously a big misunderstanding somewhere about fairness.
So we're talking about, like, what have we been looking at? What have we been witnessing this week? What have we been witnessing this last 4 years? Let me throw that to you, Jamal. You're very vocal on your show on Saturdays, WKND, about the comings, goings, ups and downs of the comedian.
Yeah,
in chief.
I can
reference them.
I can sit here and make a list. I can sit here and make a list of the egregious nature of his presidency, but I think the biggest thing, I think the best way to sum it up is that there's a segment of the population that doesn't really care about the other side of the segment. Like, he can say something like, let's just tax blue states, and they're fine with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, he can say something like Mexicans are rapists, and there's white people that are fine with that. Like, I know that if Barack Obama came out and said, these white devils, man, let me tell you, if he said that on national TV, I'd be like, yo, there's a problem with this. You know what I'm saying? I'd be like, yo, we might not want to, like, put this guy at the front of our ticket. You know what I'm saying? If a guy lied every single day, I couldn't back him, even if he was black. If he was like Black Power movement, I give money to the NAACP every year, but I hate white people and we're going to kill them all. I'd be like, I can't support this dude. So it just surprises me the extent that people will go to make excuses. And quite frankly, it makes me wonder how many other white people in history we idolize were actually buffoons, but were just covered up for. Like, how many other Trumps did we have in history? You know what I'm saying? Because they will cover any, and I'm not saying all white people are doing this, but that's the thing that most disappointed me. If you had to sum it all up, like, okay, he called African countries asshole countries, blah, blah, blah. He threw paper towels at Puerto Ricans, you know what I'm saying? But at what point do you say this is enough of you doing this to other people, to others? You understand what I'm saying? That's the point I don't get. What the majority of white women still say it's okay to treat other people this way. That's something what we have to work on, I think. And I don't know how to work on that. I really don't. Because I envision what's going to happen is he's going to break off and still do rallies and rake the Republican Party in half, and the Republican Party will be weaker for it, and he's still going to be out here like the Valley's going to be more white supremacist oriented. You know what I'm saying? Because he's going to feel untethered by the White House, and there's going to be people that still support this. The guy on my corner right now with a Trump flag still has that flag up. This battle's not done for them, even though it is for us. And I'll let the doctor take it over from there.
It's definitely not done.
Well, I would say that this was a president when he made his pitch to African American voters. He was at a rally in Michigan. And if you think about the image of the African American community in his mind, he doesn't see the diversity of Black folk. You know, there are over 40 million Black Americans in the United States, and they are quite diverse. In terms of socioeconomic status, you have an elite where, you know, people are second or third generation Howard undergrad, Meharry medical. You have a large Black middle class that constitutes the majority. You have a Black working class. And then you have people who are sometimes derisively referred to as the underclass, but are actually, as Eugene Robinson would say, the abandoned. People for whom the institutions and educational economic opportunities that are supposed to be available to people, they're cut off from those. But then you have like a whole different mix of Black folk when you look at the at least moderate fixing of immigration policy in the mid-1960s that allowed for people to immigrate to this country from the Caribbean, from sub-Saharan Africa. And so you add to that an emerging mixed race population. The Black community is diverse. We are larger than the total population of Canada. We're larger than the total population of Argentina. And you wouldn't expect all those people to think and see things alike politically. Yet when you look at the image of the African American community that exists in this president's mind, it's the things that overrepresent us: poverty, joblessness, drugs, crime. And he said to Black voters, you know, what the H do you have to lose? And it turns out people have a lot to lose. You know, it turns out people have had a lot to lose. He's talked about the places that people have come from as crap hole countries. He talks about Black communities as if they are a scene out of Mad Max and the Thunderdome. You know, the way he talked about John Lewis's district, which I think includes Georgia Tech University and the Coca-Cola corporate headquarters. He's talked about a border wall and immigrants being the bringers of crime. And his conversation about immigration, particularly from non-white countries, sounded like something from the turn of the 20th century. And he instituted a Muslim ban. All of this was before separating children from their families and putting them in cages. You might be familiar with George Takei. George Takei was, you know, Captain Sulu on Star Trek, right? And he was interned as a Japanese American. He was interned during the Second World War. And he said, as bad as internment was for my family and my people, I was never separated from my family. And that's what made this crueler, right? And so for over 70 million Americans, that wasn't a deal breaker, which makes me think for them, the cruelty is the point. As Adam Sawyer would say, the cruelty was the point, that's what they signed up for, because they saw this country changing in ways that they couldn't agree with. And you had someone who was willing to stand up and express things that they may have thought quietly, but he was willing to say it in public with his chest. And so they lined up behind him. I don't know if you can make amends with people who see things that way, but for the sake of the country, it might be worth trying, but I don't know.
Well, I just want to add to this really quickly. I think you give him too much credit when you say, you know, he believes this. I think Donald Trump knows what he's doing, because this is look, I'm from New York City. This is a man that hung out with Black people a lot. He was Hillary Clinton's #1 donor. He was Chuck Schumer's #1 donor. He hung out with Sean Puffy Combs, 50 Cent. He was at every Black party. He was the biggest, one of the biggest donators to Reverend Al Sharpton's National Action Network. He went to every dinner every year to the National Action. He knows Black people. He's doing it to pander to the people on the right who want to belittle Black dreams. You know what I'm saying? I'll give an example. The people that always say we did more for Black people than Abraham Lincoln. That's mockery. That's not a serious statement that he did more for Black people than Abraham Lincoln. That's mockery. He's mocking us when he says that. When he says most of the things that he says, hey, you know, I'm always thinking about Black people. I signed this, I signed that. No, it's mockery. It's what do you have to lose? Is mockery. He's belittling us. He's making fun of our dreams, the things that we hope for, the things that we struggle for. He's making fun of that. That's his way of making fun of it, because he lives in New York. He grew up in New York City with Black people. He knows what Black people have been through, and he knows that he doesn't have to say that, but he said it anyway because he doesn't care. He doesn't think there's any ramification for it. We found out differently today. You know what I'm saying? And he's felt that way about a lot of things. Like he's never felt that he had a price to pay for anything. So this, I mean, if it sounds like a despise the man, it's true, and I won't run away from that. But I also believe that this is a good day for America. I just don't know how to bring in people. It's one thing to disagree on policy, right? Hey, I believe this money should go here, and you believe the money should go there. But I'm talking about a party that generally despises the black race, right? That has an issue with my skin color. How do I compromise on that? How do I compromise on culture? How do I do that?
I think I would look at it this way. This president has a history of discrimination in his private businesses and dealings going back to the 1970s. The Richard Nixon Department of Housing and Urban Development took him to court for discrimination with his properties, right? And so you could enjoy the company of the black celebrity class, and you could feel happy when you get name checked by Raekwon on the purple tape, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you love black people in mass, right? That there were slaveholders who loved black sex and hated black people. There are people now who love black sex and black entertainment and black art, but despise black people. And there's a long documented history of anti-blackness with this president, as well as a disdain for other people whose value system isn't as transaction oriented as his own. He's gotten into beef with Gold Star families and doesn't understand the idea of sacrifice. It's like, these people are suckers that I don't understand what's in it for them. He views the world through a different lens, and that lens is influenced very heavily by his class status. This is a man who was born on third base and thought he hit a triple. And so, I don't look at him as like, I can separate his personal relationships with members of the black elite from his feelings toward black people as a whole. And that's where we have to look at the policies and the practices. And people took him to court for discrimination. He didn't want black people on the floor at his casinos when he came through. Didn't trust black people to be accountants to count his money. So, this is who he is. You born around, you're not going to die square.
I agree. I just feel like he knows how to hurt black people. That's it.
We got a lot.
Go ahead.
So thinking on this volume of participants and people who have come out to make their voice heard this year for this presidential election. So in this country, we kind of treat the presidential elections like a Super Bowl. It's like everybody comes, everybody's taking part, everybody's pulling for their side or whatever. And then after that, everybody kind of goes back to their corner. Now, what are the risks in only paying attention every 4 years? People act like, the presidency is the thing. And once I've made my voice heard on who I think the president should be, I can just go back and just do my thing. What are the risks inherent in that? Doctor, I'm going to start with you.
One of the things that I would say, brother, is that if we look at the American system of government, we pay a great deal of attention to what happens at the federal level of analysis, but you have to pay even closer attention to state and local governments. The closer you get to your address, the closer you get to governments where decisions that are being made have a direct impact on you. So you have to think about the race for the state legislature and the state senate. You have to think about your county council, your city council, the representation in your townships. If you have a family, you have to think about the composition of your school board. Those are public positions. In many places, they're nonpartisan contests, which means you can't rely on the cognitive shortcut, a party ID, to make a decision. You have to do a lot more homework to understand who these people are, what they believe, and how their election might impact your children's education. So when people go to the polls as voters, they have to think first about the things that they care about, and then they have to consider their options. Now, ultimately, the choices that people make are limited to the choices that they have. But people talk about, the government, and it's like, well, you have over 90,000 governments in this country, a federal government, 50 state governments, 3,031 county governments, almost 20,000 municipality or city governments, 16,000 townships, about 13,000 school districts. So there's a lot of opportunity for voters to have an influence. And I would challenge some of your listeners and your viewers to think of themselves as something more than voters. If you have a spirit of service. If you're driven by solving big problems, you can be more than a voter. There are people who have experiences in their professional lives and in their personal lives that give them the types of skills that would make for good public officials. They have the ability to listen to others. They can connect people. They know how to organize. They know how to politic. They know how to fundraise. And all of those skills in your private life are transferable to public service. So if you look out and you're frustrated with the choices that you have as a voter, make yourself a better option for the people and run. And one of the things that I've been encouraged by over the years, when I think about the networks that some of us belong to as Syracuse people, many of our classmates have done just that. And they hold positions in local government and in state government. And in gaining those positions, they're trying to do something better. And so I'll close by saying this. A lot of times we tune out on politics and we'll say, well, they're all corrupt. It doesn't matter. And every time people of good faith do something like that, you leave all of this in the hands of the very people you don't think are trustworthy in the first place. So things can improve if we disengage and ignore the system. You see what that's gotten you at the federal level of government. Now think about what that's getting you in your state. So, you want to see better. Well, maybe it's your turn.
And let me just add that
everybody.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I just wanted to add that.
No, I just said everybody has a chance to make a difference. Everybody has a choice and a chance to make a difference. So don't feel that you can't make a difference just because you're one individual. Everybody together working unified can definitely make a difference. To feel discouraged is not good. But go ahead, Jamal. What were you saying?
Okay. When talking about participating in government, I try to urge people to first understand how government works. Government speaks with budgets. It speaks by spending money, right? So there's all these arguments about why people should vote, and they go back to, people died for your right to vote and stuff. I'd like to put forth another theory on why you should go to vote, and that's called the budget. The number one reason why government exists is to form a budget to figure out how to spend this money that's taken in taxes. I know there's a whole lot of other stuff that goes on about making laws on whether abortion is legal and stuff, but the central role of government is that budget. And that budget has everybody's money in it. And depending on who's elected, it gets decided on how that money is spent. And if you don't watch your investment, what I'm trying to push is the idea of this government as your investment. And I want you to watch the government in the same way you watch your investments. You don't send your 5-year-old child to the store with $20 and tell him to get whatever he wants. He's going to buy a bunch of candy. He's going to buy a bunch of stuff that's not good for him and not good stuff that sustains him. So we shouldn't send the children in our government to spend money without our supervision as well. And things like the census, for example, when people don't answer the census, they're cutting themselves out of their own money. There's a budget here that's being distributed. And if you don't raise your hand and say, I care about that money, I need a playground in my neighborhood, just like they have a playground in the rich neighborhood of the block. But you know what? They raised their hand. You don't have to beg white people to count themselves. They know that they mean something. You know what I'm saying? But us, we feel like we have something to be afraid of. So there's a budget here, and America is your investment too. You know what I'm saying? Things you care about. When people have their kids in school, they go to PTA meetings. Why? Because their kids are there. Like right, their kids are there. They're like, I want to make sure this teacher's right for my kids. Well, part of America is your child too. So I urge people, when they take your tax money, your enemies will decide where your tax money goes if you don't raise your hand and say, damn it, I want a park on my corner. I think that we are incarcerating too many people for the color of their skin. You know what I'm saying? You have a say in this. And we have a lot to talk about with the Electoral College and stuff like that. That's something we're going to have to work out. There are a lot of ways around that. But your vote matters. And your vote tells people what to do with that money that's in the center of government that's being divvied out. And if you know anything about capitalism, under capitalism, anything that grows takes investment. If you want to grow in any field, you have to invest time. You have to invest money, sometimes education. If you want to start a business, you got to get the money for the startup capital. You got to, sweep the floors, open the doors. You know what I'm saying? And America's no different. And if you don't spend the time to invest your time and paying attention to where your money is going, other people are going to do it. And those people might not like you very much. That's the truth.
Okay.
So given that backdrop, Jamal, why is it so difficult to get people interested in politics, especially our people? Why is that such a trying to drag the horse to water and the horse still may not come, may not drink? Why are we so averse to getting
I think there's a concerted effort. I think there's a concerted effort to make. I think there's a concerted effort to make politics not interesting. Like, there's a question I often wonder when I watch sports. How is it that someone can buy into a team when politics I'm into politics, so it kind of presents the same type of tensions and teamwork and stuff like that. When I see politics, I'm seeing rhetoric, and I enjoy swimming in that and seeing what's true and what's not, and thinking about it. I think first and foremost, we've got a problem with education in America. So you have people out here that really don't understand how government works. You know, whenever they have these people on the street surveys, you find that like 50-60% of the public can't even name the vice president. You know what I'm saying? They can't even name the three branches of government. And I mean, I just believe that the lower, what are perceived as the lower classes in America, the working class of America, are educated to basically be bus drivers and civil workers, and not really know how the government works. No one really educates these kids anymore. And so I think part of it is that we have a lack of education. If you don't understand how things work, then you're likely not to see your role in it. That's one. And people, when you're not educated enough to know how bad you're doing, you can't possibly know what's better. How to get into a better direction. So there's an education issue here, and there's also, people get into what's advertised. I often tell people, bananas are God's gift to the world. They have this taste, right? But people don't buy bananas; they buy banana bread. Why is that? Because banana bread is advertised, right? Because people make money off the sugar, right? But bananas, they only cost 49 cents, so there's not much money in that. So you rarely see bananas advertised, but you always see banana bread at the front of the store, right? So people do what's kind of advertised to them. And there's a general feeling in this country that reading is bad, being a nerd. Oh, you speak a lot of languages, you're a nerd. Intellect is like frowned upon. You're not strong if you're smart. All these cultural things that hold us back. We're a country of convenience. And that in the end is coming back to bite us. We need to be a country of intellectuals. But we frown on intellectualism, and part of that is racism, because intellectual, academia, intellectualism, it evens people out. It evens the score. That's where you find white educated people not voting for Trump. It evens the score. People not interested in evening the score aren't really interested in education. You know what I'm saying? They don't want to see that the lowest among us can be the greatest among us, because they were born with a certain position in life and they always want to be seen as that, right? So you have different people here, but I think the issue is education here. That's what the real issue. That's why I'm so glad to have a professor here with me.
Excellent segue. Dr. Belt, same question. Why is it so difficult to get our people energized around this topic and this area of inquiry?
Some of it might stem from the way that people are socialized or the way that they're taught about politics. I think about, I'm a Brooklyn guy, born and raised, but I've been living in the South now as long as I was living in Brooklyn. And in a lot of places, there are certain subjects you don't talk about in mixed company: religion, sex, politics, because it's considered impolite. And so people don't look at politics as something that you're supposed to talk about in mixed company. From another angle, part of the reason why people might not be interested in it is because it requires time. So if you think about the 24-hour day, it's supposed to be 8 hours to work, 8 hours to rest, 8 hours to do whatever I will. If you only have so much leisure time, are you going to spend that with your family, with your friends, or in some other pursuit? Or are you going to plop down and channel surf and go through the networks or go through your Twitter feed or your social media feed and devour this political information? Robert Dahl wrote a book a long time ago called Who Governs? And in that book, he said you could divide the population between Homo civicus and Homo politicus. And Homo civicus is your everyday, regular, people, that they are occasionally interested in politics, especially when economic or political issues have a direct impact on their life that they could see and feel. But when that moment passes, they kind of go back to the flow and get back into life and doing the other things that they care to do. But then there are those of us that might be more like Jamal, the political animal, the people who devour this information and they pay close attention to it. They understand how the system operates. They understand their own interests. They know how to interact with the system to get things done. So in moments of great economic upheaval or political turmoil, yeah, your average American who might not pay much attention will get involved. You just had a record turnout in a presidential election that took place during a pandemic that has really hurt this nation, with 235,000 people dead and thousands more infected, not knowing what the short-term or long-term effects are going to be. And we just had the highest turnout in a presidential election since 1900, because there's a clear threat and people are responding to that in some way. But when the moment passes, turnout will drop, and turnout will drop precipitously in the next election, which is going to be in 2 years, and it's a midterm cycle. So I think that those are some of the reasons why we might see people being less interested in politics. And if we know why they're not interested, then maybe we could do something to get them interested. And that begins with them and their families and their communities, and helping people to understand what's at stake. As you noted, Jamal, governments control resources at every level of government. They control resources, school budget allocations, for recreation and public health, for employment, because governments employ people. Government might be the only job creator that people hate. And if you look at all these people, right, they're public servants, your school teachers, your librarians, your sanitation workers, your parks department workers, your postal workers, police officers, firefighters. All of those things are at the disposal of governments. So if the government has control over resources and you're not engaged, your community won't get its fair share, and your community will be poor as a result. It might even be unsafer as a result. So I think all of us have an interest in paying attention to politics. And if you're not paying attention, if you're not at the room, you're not at the table, then you on the menu, man.
Let me just add, please. I don't want people to get the idea that they have to be on a Black Lives Matter protest in order to participate. I want to put forth the idea that you use your individual talents. You know how I got on the radio? I said I'm a talker. I'm not the best talker in the world, but I'm going to put myself out there and have a little courage, and I'm going to learn as I go along, and I'm going to become better every day. And that's my talent. I really wish I was a doctor and I could make a vaccine like Dr. Jonas Salk. He really contributed to the world by giving his vaccine for free. But what I do is talk. That's a lot less than a vaccine, but it's my role. Everyone has a role. Everybody has a role. Let me tell you, on my talk show, I have a sign language interpreter that does it on Instagram, right? I give her a role. I want deaf people to know that even if you can't hear, I want to talk to you. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not trying to do like slick promotion. I'm just trying to say that everyone has a role, no matter how small the role may be to you. For example, if you love kids, you can mentor. I've been mentoring at the YMCA here. They gave me Mentor of the Month. It feels great. I took this kid to learn how to, I said, what did I want to learn when I was 14? I want to learn how to get a job because I wanted money in my pocket. So I took him around to different stores and I had him fill out applications when I was with him. And I had the greatest time of my life. And when I did it, I'm in a store. My father walks in and sees me mentoring this kid. And it was one of the greatest times of my life. You get something out of participating. It's not you giving. You get something back. I always, as a professor, I know you learn from your students, don't you? Professors learn from their students. So it's a give and take from your society that you've invested in, right? You don't have to, you may not be the type to march in Brocker Street. I understand that. You may not be the type to go to jail. Do your little thing. Maybe you just know how to do makeup really well. Go teach a young girl how to do her makeup so she can get ready for a job interview. Every little thing matters. And even if it's a small action, it's the spirit that matters because that's what translates into motivation to other people. So when you show a little vulnerability, people see that in you and they take it forward. And that's what we have to do. We don't all have to run. I'll be honest with you, I'm a kingmaker. Baker man knows me. I'm a kingmaker. I'm not a king. If you put me in an office to run, I'll probably lose. You know what I'm saying? But I can make someone else the king. I can manage a king.
You'll be both.
You know what I'm saying? You know the stories that were told about me on Syracuse campus. So, you know what I'm saying? Don't put me in the office, but put me as the guy that can put
I don't need that kind of attention.
you know what I'm saying? So there you go. So some people, we're all made for different things, and it's fun. You know, it's okay that I never played basketball, but I like to watch it. You know what I'm saying? You don't have to be every man. And people get the idea that political action means that extreme stuff. Like, oh, I'm not good at cold calling people. Okay, it's all right if you don't do that. How about gathering 5 friends and telling them, or calling 5 friends and telling them to call the census? The census is really important. I know we passed the date for that, but little things matter. There is no such thing as a little thing as long as somebody's paying attention.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think I was talking to Arthur the other day just about what the doctor was talking about, was that it's more than just the president's election that you should be voting for. There's so many other branches of government. And so it was so good to hear you bring focus to that, because I was talking to him the other day. I said, everything is about commercializing the president. Vote for your president, vote for your president. But there were so many more branches of government that came before this election that people should have definitely been paying attention to, that leads up to this. This is the last thing. And it's like, there's so many more elections to come that I want people to also don't fizzle out now that you done changed who the president is. Stay focused, stay driven, because you can change so many more things in your environment and that are around you by picking your governor-elect, by picking, you're definitely dealing with your schools and everything. We can change so many things. This is just one. But if we don't change the other things, then nothing's really going to get done. But what do you guys think that now Joe is in office? What is his first thing to tackle? What do you think he's going to be his first thing that he's going to reverse or change?
Well,
is he going to go on a reversal tour like
Trump did?
Everything undo, reverse.
You remember? He spent almost a whole 3 months trying to overturn absolutely everything.
Well,
what do you guys think Joe's going to do?
Well, Joe has 73 days, because it's late, so we can call this day done. He has 73 days before the inauguration. And what you're going to see in that time period is some interaction between Biden's team and Trump's team, because there's supposed to be a transition from one administration to the next. There are national security issues that have to be considered, public health crises that have to be considered, economic issues, and there's going to be a sharing of information. The president-elect and the vice president-elect are now going to get certain briefings and information so that they can hit the ground running when they come in as an administration. And there are also going to be certain policy considerations, right? There were things that President Trump did by executive order that can be undone by executive order. So, for instance, at the very end of the Obama administration, they said that they were going to pull the federal government out of the private prison industry. And that executive order was rescinded by the Trump administration in the very early days, as Arthur was suggesting. Well, that's something that Joe Biden can change through executive order. He's also talked about rejoining certain international climate agreements and things of that sort. So there are certain things that he can do as the chief executive that don't require the approval of Congress or a bill from Congress. There are other things, though, that will require interacting with Congress, and that's where a president's going to need some help. You're looking at a Democratic-controlled House of Representatives, but depending on the outcome of these remaining Senate races, there might be a Republican-controlled Senate, which means divided government, and it's become difficult to get things done in recent years under that system of divided government. So where do the people come into all of this? The missus was making a point about staying engaged. The things that you all care about as people don't go away after election day is done. The things that drove you to participate are still going to matter after the election. And if you think about the interests of Black and brown people, you've only had 8 presidents in this country's history who can be classified as anti-racist. Most American presidents have been white supremacists, racist, racially neutral, racially ambivalent. Right. You've only had 8 anti-racist presidents. And even those anti-racist presidents were oftentimes paradigmatic and slow to move on Black rights-based and material-based or economic concerns. They didn't want to risk losing white support by pursuing these things that might help people who white folk will regard as being undeserving of public or private assistance. So it was interesting then to see President-elect Biden immediately on the stump say to Black people, you've had my back at every turn, and I promise to have your back. I want to see what that means in terms of policy. But if a president's going to move and if Congress is going to move, that requires pressure. So here's where it comes in. Some people will apply that pressure by being out in the streets, engaging in nonviolent direct action or doing other things. Other people might apply that pressure this way. Hi, my name is so-and-so. I live at such and such. I'm a registered voter and I live in your district. And here's what I care about. Hi, my name is so-and-so. I'm a registered voter. I live in your state. Here's what I care about. And if you get enough people doing those sort of things, it can make a difference because they do pay attention to the people that live in their district and are as voters. Finally, I'll say that you can talk with your money. Money talks in the American political system, and you can put your money behind those people or organizations that are doing the kind of work that you believe in. And it doesn't require big money donations. If you can spare $25 to the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, that's going to make a difference to them when thousands of people are giving them $25. If you like the work that Stacey Abrams did in Georgia and in her native Wisconsin, she was born in Madison, and she also did some work organizing voters in Wisconsin. If you like the work that her organization did, donate $25. And those things add up. So you might not be able to do that work yourself, but you can support the people who are able to do it.
And to that point, Doctor, in some cases, some of us work for corporations and companies that will match our contributions to certain things. Yeah. So you can bring your company, you can bring your work to work as well. Absolutely. Have them donating and supporting causes that we support, but it starts with us. We have to be the trigger. We have to be the ones to say, okay, I'm putting 25. Okay, you're gonna match the 25. Okay, that's 50 now.
And you don't have to feel any kind of way about that 25, because think about it like this. It's $25 more than what they had before you decided to make your donation. And it matters when you can stack all of those things up.
I mean, I make decent money for a single man, and I've given money to. I've given less than 25. I mean, I have no shame, brother. I'm like, yo, I get no tax write-off for this, so you're gonna get what you're gonna get, and nobody's ever given it back yet. I'm waiting for it to see if I get a mail on my mailbox. Nobody's ever sent $1 back. I want to address the question that you actually said. You said, you basically asked, what does Biden have to concentrate on? And I have 4 things. This is going to be heavily subjective, but I'm increasingly disgusted with Trump's cabinet, and I can't wait till we get a cabinet that's not full of crooks and obnoxious. I won't say it because it's a family show, but this cabinet has to go. Betsy DeVos. I have a special personal hatred for Mike Pompeo. Just the whole cabinet has to go. Even Ben Carson, like the guy who says nothing ever. So I'm looking for a better cabinet, and that will lead me into the big thing that Joe Biden has to do is set the tone. I know people are like, don't listen to what the president says, watch what he does. No. I listen to what a brother says. What you say matters. I was brought up to believe that what I say, what a man says, you should be able to take that to the bank. My best friends are my friends because what they tell me, I can take to the bank. If I can't take it to the bank, I don't trust you to even be my dog catcher. I don't trust you to do anything, clean my kitchen. You know what I'm saying? If you're a pathological liar. So I expect Joe Biden not to lie and to set the tone of truthfulness and of I care about telling you. When someone lies to you about something that you can check easily, that means they don't respect you. If I look at Adolphus and say, I'm a white man, and he can see me right now, he's going to be like, yo, this guy doesn't have much respect for me because he knows I can see him. So I want Joe Biden to, first of all, get a cabinet because, see, a cabinet is the key to everything running well. If you have sensible people who use logic at the top of every agency, then they can be persuaded by good arguments. They're not going to know everything. Nobody knows everything. But they can be persuaded by people coming and say, hey, maybe you should do it this way. maybe I'm a Republican, but listen to me, I have some good ideas. Logical people can look through he's a Democrat. You know what I'm saying? And so that by choosing a good cabinet, you set the tone. And as far as issues is concerned, this is I'm going to scale it back a little bit. I'm going to give him a low expectation. If Joe Biden can fix healthcare, he'll go down in history as a great president. I mean, I want justice. I want a lot of other things, but I'm an independent contractor. I'm an attorney. I work for myself, and Obamacare changed my life. You know what I'm saying? I stopped having to pay thousands and thousands of bills to the hospital. It changed my life. And if he can make that so that every American get affordable health care, I just spent $3,000 on my teeth last week. Money, no one likes to give away money. You know what I'm saying? I didn't have to spend that kind of money, but there's no healthcare plan out here that's valuable to me. So if he can fix this, if he just gets out fixing healthcare after 4 years, he'll be praised. You know what I'm saying? And one more thing. I know people want to let bygones be bygones. I know people want to let bygones be bygones, but there should be a Trump investigation into everything that happened during this administration, everything he might have told foreign leaders, everything he might have said or any secrets he might have done. I have a feeling he'll leave the country. I don't put anything beyond him to do. I don't know what's going to happen over the next 73 days. He might release some serial killers for all we know, just to get back in America. He's bitter. He's the type of person you can't trust what he's going to do and what not going to do. But I expect there to be some kind of ramifications for some of the actions that Trump took during his administration and possibly even more importantly before his administration with regards to tax evasion or what have you. One of the whole bottom lines
hopefully
of this country,
we'll look at what he does in the next 73 days.
Yeah.
Because we got to watch that.
The law is to be applied equally.
73 days is a long time when you got certain people behind the wheel.
Yes,
the law is to be applied equally, man. I do not expect President Biden to pardon Trump or nothing like that. Do you commit a crime? You commit a crime. I don't care how many votes you got. You know what I'm saying? So the law is to be applied equally. I expect the law to be applied equally, and that's a favor to all of our ancestors and all the people that suffer. We are still a country that puts people to death on the word of one witness. So I expect the law to be applied equally if Trump broke the law in any of his endeavors.
Absolutely. I just have one last question for you guys. What do you think about all the Black Trump supporters who have felt like Trump is the second coming, that there will be many years of darkness to come because he's lost? They're ready to, I know so many fellow Black Trump support in our own families, circles of friends who are been praying, doing candlelight visuals. What do you say to them who are like, we really need to be prayed up right now because darkness is falling?
I want somebody to explain them to me first. What do we do?
I've explained it to him. He still doesn't understand why they believe in him so heartedly. I did try to explain it to my husband, but he just is like, I don't get it. But there are.
How do evangelicals take this man as their guy? There is nothing about him. I'm like, are you confusing him with his vice president? Like, there's nothing about
this guy. He's part of the prophecy.
Well, those are two different issues, and your wife has hit the nail on the head. So I want to hear what she has to say because she's going somewhere. So go on.
Yeah. They believe that he's part of a plan that God has set forth for us, right? I know we don't try to get really religious based on our programs, but with talking about Trump, you have to go there just a little bit, just because a lot of people who believe in him are evangelicals who take that to that next level, that he is the second coming, and they have a lot of faith. Like I said, just the simple fact with Jerusalem and everything. Like I said, I've talked to my family members. They are like, he has to be it, or else there's going to be darkness to fall upon the U.S.
I'm glad I don't read that book.
And everything. He's being a jokester, but he understands what I'm trying to say. Of course. And just wanted to hear you guys' views on that. Like, do you believe? First of all, are you a believer? And second, do you feel that your belief has to go into politics and mesh together with politics?
Three things for me on this. First, for the people who support the president who are evangelicals, and typically when people use that in a political conversation, they're talking about white people. They're talking about white evangelical Christians, right? From their vantage point, you don't have to be perfect to be chosen, right? God chose Noah. Noah was a drunk, but he chose Noah for some greater purpose, right? So you have all throughout the Bible people who are flawed, whose past is checkered, but were chosen by God for some greater purpose to achieve something, right? To do something. They were instruments. And so if you're looking at him through those eyes, he's the instrument where you could get a conservative Supreme Court that would overturn Roe v. Wade and make abortion unlawful, or that would overturn Obergefell versus Hodges or Lawrence versus Texas, cases which extended rights to LGBTQ people as citizens under the 14th Amendment, due process rights, equal protection rights. So if you believe those cases were wrongly decided, then he is your instrument to get the outcome that you want. As far as religion and politics, people might think those things are incongruent because, there's an establishment clause and a free exercise clause in the First Amendment. But we know that in terms of people's political socialization, something that is an ongoing process, it starts when you're young, it continues throughout your adulthood. It's your family, social groups, peer groups, the media, and religious institutions, whether it's church or shul or mosque or temple. Those things rub off on you. You do more than develop a personal relationship with God and your fellow believers. They instruct you about politics. The leadership of the civil rights movement came out of the church. It was Reverend Martin Luther King, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, Reverend John Lewis, Reverend J.A. Delane, right? The women who powered the movement were members of those institutions. John Lewis would say, if you looked up at the pulpit, you saw all these men. But if you looked out at the pew, it would be 60-40 women and men. And women drove the Montgomery bus boycott before King ever became a leader of that movement, right? So the same thing happens on the religious right, that they're being socialized in their religious services the same way that others are. So there is some interaction between religious institutions and people's political behavior. Finally, I would go back to what I said in the open. Black people are diverse, and that includes diversity in political and social thought. There are multiple and competing traditions in Black thought, from the liberalism or progressivism of people like Frederick Douglass or King, to the nationalism of people like Huey P. Newton and Bobby Seale when they founded the Panther Party, to the Black Marxism of people who see a problem with capitalism and democracy. That democracy has failed Black people, capitalism has failed Black people, and you need to radically reimagine the world if you are going to create a better world. To Black feminists who identify the connection between these interlocking systems of oppression, racism, sexism, classism, and the like. That ideological diversity includes a very old tradition in Black political thought of conservatism. So you can draw a line from people like Tim Scott to Booker T. Washington and find those attitudes expressed. It is probably, though, the most maligned of the traditions in Black political thought. Like, Black people will clown Black conservatives, but they've been with us for time immemorial. And the Black conservative and the Black nationalist might agree on the nature of the problem, but then offer very different solutions in confronting that problem. So you're going to have Black people who support Trump or the Republican Party more broadly because they understand that to be in their interest if they're emphasizing certain sorts of things. So, they exist. They have a right to exist. I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, and I understand why they're here.
Your question made me think of. I'm sorry. Your question made me think of a question I was asking myself last night. I was asking myself last night, at what point did somebody think the concept of kings was sustainable? Like, just think about it. I'm the king, my family gets to rule, and we're all gonna rule you. We own all the land, and y'all are just paupers. Like, who cheered this on? Like, who came up with this idea? Like, yeah, I'll just be king of everybody. And then when I'm done being king, I'll just pass it to my son. Like, where was that thought of being sustainable? And the answer to that is the real line to draw here is the line of authoritarianism. There are just some people who think it's all right to tell other people how to live. Like, or they think it's all right for the government to be like, you can't have an abortion. No, we're talking to you. We're the government outside of you telling you what you can do with your own body. Like, or they think it's all right for a president to have his daughters and his son be as senior advisors on a cabinet. And nepotism, flagrant nepotism. And for the president to take, to spend his American money at his own hotels. Like, there are people that just think that's all right. There are people in Venezuela for this crooked dictator they have down there, who are cheering them on. It's like a personality cult. There were just people like that. And with regard to the evangelicals, I've been to Africa, where I've been to churches with slave prisons underneath them, and they had a circle in the middle of the church where they sold slaves. I'm gonna get myself in a little bit of trouble here, but part of the practice of religion is a suspension of reality to a certain extent, and almost a participatory delusion. And when you're in that kind of surrounding, it's kind of easy to be convinced of a lot of different things. So, the evangelicals, when you believe some of the things that evangelicals believe, and I'm not even talking about in terms of the Bible, I'm just talking about in terms of culture, right? Then you can kind of convince yourself of anything, right? Because, you're the Southern Belle, that, there's this whole, patriarchy that you're subscribed to, where you don't mind being told that women are just in the kitchen because, hey, in your neighborhood they are. You don't mind being told that women don't work. You're working to get your husband a job. He's the one that works in the household because, that's the kind of life that you always dreamed of. That's the culture that you were part of. There's a certain authoritarian. The people that like Trump, that are minorities, I find to be authoritarian. They don't mind. They think it's strong to say the things that he says. They think it's a expression of strength, an expression of certainty. That's how they take it. You know what I'm saying? Obviously, I disagree with them, but to Dr. Bell's point,
refreshing, like that he's not being phony, that he's speaking his truth, where so many other before him were thinking that but didn't say.
That's an authoritarian type of thought, because here's the thing: the presidency is a service position. It's not a king position. It's a service position. And so these people get it wrong. They're coming from the point of view where it's like, we have to respect him. No, he has to respect us, right? And I usually find this with foreign people that are immigrants, people that come from other countries with real dictators in them. They see Trump as kind of a dictator light that they can almost like. They would have liked their dictator to be more like Trump, more talkative and less killing people. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I see in them. It does surprise me.
What I was gonna say, Jamal, is there's people who were immigrants themselves in my own family. I'm like, how can you support
immigrants themselves who very much support Trump?
But that's what I'm saying. I see the reason I support Trump.
He reminds them of effective leadership in their own where they've come from.
But that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. To them, Trump is the kind of nice dictator that doesn't kill people. You know what I'm saying? Like, they see dictators that kill people and make people disappear. Trump is a dictator that says the same things, but he doesn't make people disappear. Now, of course, he can't because he get put in jail. But they see him as, well, at least he doesn't kill people. You know what I'm saying? At least he doesn't make people disappear. At least he didn't take my family's store. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't realize that we have a system. They don't realize.
Personally, but
there are 545 children where they can't find their parents.
Yes, because he's done it.
You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it depends on how you want to define disappearing people, right? So there are certain immigrants where if you came to America through the front door, you want other people to follow the process the way that you did.
Right.
That you may have had the financial wherewithal to apply to come legally. If you look at the way that American immigration law is structured, even though it was somewhat liberalized in 1965, where you drop these racial quotas, it still places an emphasis on family reunification, which privileges people who are already in the country, and it places an emphasis on bringing certain skills. So if you look at people who come here from sub-Saharan Africa or the Caribbean, that oftentimes they're coming with a much higher level of education than other people, because that's the bar for them to get in. So for first or second generation immigrants, they'll look and say, well, my family came through the front door. Why can't you do the same? And if you look at this country's earliest immigration policies, which were established in 1790, if you were white and you could get here, you could stay. And if you were white and male, you could be a citizen within a year.
That's the criteria.
That was the criteria in 1790. The criteria became more restrictive at the turn when you get to the late 19th and early 20th century, because the countries of origins of the immigrants changed. Instead of coming from Northern and Western Europe, they were coming from Southern and Eastern Europe. and they were held in low regard by people who called themselves white. So if you were Irish or you were Italian, you were Catholic or you were Jewish, you were not regarded as a fully white person, and they didn't like you. And they especially held Chinese and Japanese immigrants in low regard. And that's when you saw the emergence of these more restrictive immigration policies that didn't change until 1965. So you look at where people are coming from now. They're coming from Central America, they're coming from the Caribbean, and people are either running towards something or running away from something. If you could have the good life where you were from, why would you leave? You know, like you look at the way that people move within their own country. If you could have the good life in Brooklyn, why would you leave?
And let me add, you know, you can see the authoritarian tilt in most of this. Like when you see his rallies, there was one rally where he thought a Trump supporter was actually a Hillary Clinton supporter, and he called him fat. He said, "Look at fat, so you need to lose a little weight." Then later on, he found out he was a Trump supporter, and the guy he called fat is like, "That's all right, you know, I am called fat." I'm like, you know, first of all, the president's not supposed to call you fat. You know what I'm saying? The fact that that you're accepting that means that you're saying, okay, it's okay for the president to call me names, but I can't call him names. There are people that actually were mad that Joe Biden told him to shut up. Here he is being interrupted on stage, and he shut up, man. And people are like, that's a disrespect to the president. So here's the guy that makes fun of disabled people on camera, calls people names, curses. I don't live in that kind of country where the president, we're the servants of the president. And the difference to me with people that support him is that they don't mind feeling like servants to the president. Like one time he comes out and he says, "Hey, I need you to defend me." Isn't he the billionaire? Why can't you defend yourself? Aren't you supposed to be defending us? Why do we have to save you? He wasn't even like putting out any policy at one point. He was just like, "Look, here's my grievances for the day." You know what I'm saying? Pity me, even though I was the one born with $400 million, you were born with nothing. And there are people who are fine with that, who are fine with authoritarianism, who are fine with, okay, I'm just a pauper, and well, you're the guy who knows everything, and you know, they're just people that are fine with that. And they cross black or white. Now, a lot of people, I think, on the white side are just like, well, I'm really scared of demographic change, and he's the only one protected. Fear drives people. And white people aren't dumb. They know that there's been a lot of disparaging things happen to black people for decades, hundreds of years, and they're afraid. Some of them are afraid. You know, I don't know why they would be afraid, but I guess I can't blame them. But
No,
this
we
is
know
the
why they're
response.
afraid. We've asked people. We have the surveys. You know, we look at the rallies, right? And it was more than the mean talk. Like he was like, "Hey, I wish we lived at a time when you could rough people up a little bit." And people started fighting people at rallies, including people who were demonstrating nonviolently, right? So there was a rally at Louisville, Kentucky, where a black woman, a young college student, was roughed up and physically abused by a crowd. There was a rally where an older white man punched a young black guy in the face as he was being escorted up the steps, and the police arrested the man who got punched in the face. So we saw actual violence at rallies, right? Part of the problem is that, you know, some people just can't let go of that racism narcotic. And because they can't let go of that racism narcotic, if they see someone who is going to preserve the privilege to which they have become accustomed as white folk, they're going to double down on that. And when you talk about systemic racism and white privilege, there are white people who will say, "Well, I'm poor and I've never had any privilege." And it's like, listen, if you can be white and have a hard life. The thing is, your life isn't hard because you're white.
Right.
And therein lies the difference, right? So for a certain set of white folk, we know that racial animosities with them can be triggered by times of economic distress. We had that during the Great Recession of 2008, 2009, which created the Tea Party movement, which gave Trump a foray into politics as someone who propagated the birther conspiracy. So increased economic hardship and then increased political and economic competition from black people and brown people lead to white nationalist movements. This is the research of one of my mentors, the late Ron Walters, something that I've followed up on in my own research. So we know what the triggers are. And you had increased political and economic competition represented by a black man becoming president, and people could not accept that. If Barack Obama is not president, you don't get President Trump. It was the blowback. There's always a blowback.
And you know what triggers it too? Education. Black people being educated. Black people being educated, black people having money. I come from a family that probably has more money than most black families, and I get hate mail because I have an inheritance or because I'm an attorney. You're not a real black man. Your mother and your father paid for you to go to law school, this and that. You're not a real black. I get that. And I'm just like, I'm really, really happy that you're upset that I have something. You know what I'm saying? Because my parents struggled for me to have something. And I'm glad that they'd be laughing in their graves right now if they knew you were upset about it. You know what I'm saying? So, yes, I don't have to struggle like you do. You know what I'm saying? And I say all types of things because I'm like, they know that we weren't really supposed to have anything. You know what I'm saying? The people that support Trump. And I think that most of them are uneducated for a reason. Like, these are white people who could just step from high school into a job and make, middle class status, coal, digging out coal or whatever, doing oil or whatever. These are not jobs that black people could easily get. But this gave them a privilege, and they believe, check this out. They actually believe that the government owes them the same job that their grandfather had. Now, me being a black man, I know I can be fired tomorrow. Like, if I walk into work and they say, dude, let you go today,
I might just
count me as one that's not surprised. You know what I'm saying? I've seen it happen to my friends, like, have $200,000 jobs, and the next day they're gone. I've seen it happen. We know we could get fired. For some reason, like, if they don't have the job their grandfather had, it's like a big uproar, like, oh, my job is supposed to be here forever. The government has to step in and guarantee me the same job. I don't care if it hurts the economy. I don't care if it hurts the greenhouse gas emissions or whatever. I just want this. I want the same stability without having to go to college. See,
But that's the point, right?
Yeah.
Like the increased political and economic competition. So if you see record numbers of African Americans going to the United States Congress or getting elected in state government, if you see 3-4 black candidates for school board out of 8 possible candidates, that can be triggering. And so too can black economic advancement. So they think, well, if Jamal has these things, if the Mr. and Mrs. have these things, then they must have gotten them at my expense. They see the world and race as a zero-sum game. So if black and brown people are on the come up, it's happening because they're taking things from me that should be rightfully mine. And here's that racism narcotic. People don't know what competition look like. You haven't had to compete. And now that you have to compete, you out here stressed. Because it's like, yo, I get down, I'm a creep, I'm a hound, I'm a eat. So we got to compete. Yeah. I'm coming for your throat. And that's the problem. People haven't had to get out here and compete. And now that they have to, that competition looks like oppression. Because people aren't as good as they thought they were. They got by with being mediocre, and that's never been possible for us.
Right. Like one of the laws they hate in California that was recently passed. California passed a law where they were like, you have to have a minority on your board if you're a company in California. And they hated that. I mean, how easy is it? You can have a board of 200 people. How easy it is. Oh, let me get a black person on there just to satisfy the law. But they don't want to give any kind of like leeway to the corporate boardroom, And so you see that. And you're absolutely right, Doc.
But this, to your point earlier, where you were talking about they were getting people, our president, we're getting people to fight and attack other at rallies. They are ready and lined up supporters ready to riot and things because he did not win. In these next 70-something days that he's still in office, do you believe he will encourage them to go out and wreak havoc in these streets for his vengeance?
I mean, people are suggestible. And unfortunately, we've already seen, right? We don't have to, in 2016, all of this was hypothetical. In 2020, we have evidence. We know what we've seen across the states. We know what we saw in Charlottesville, Virginia. We know what we've seen in Portland. We know what we saw in Michigan, where they went to the state capitol with weapons. But one of the things that's always irked me is when people talk about, I'm not my ancestors. And I'm just like, you don't understand your ancestors, because we come from a long line of hex-throwing goons who would knuck if you buck. And when I look at shows like HBO's Lovecraft Country, they went back and did a series of episodes about Tulsa. They showed it in all its glory, and then they showed the riots. But what they showed you in the riots were these black men, women, and children grabbing their weapons and defending their homes and their communities. They were fighting back. Claude McKay, Harlem Renaissance poet, if we must die, let it not be like hogs hunted and penned in an inglorious spot where round us bark the maddening dogs, making their mock of our accursed lot. That if we must die nobly, right? So people were willing to buck back. And that's what you're seeing right now. So it's ugly that it is this way, but you're also seeing people who are out here like, listen, try Jesus, but don't try me because I throw hands.
Mhm.
And people will throw hands
Absolutely.
and people will buck shots because they believe in the Second Amendment too. And they believe in defending their homes and defending their families. And so these folk who think they're going to get out here with some free head whipping run the same risk that these black people do. They run the risk of dying. So these are some interesting times. And what you've seen from black people is increased numbers of people buying guns, buying ammunition, forming gun clubs, and practicing armed self-defense in a way that was advocated for by people from Ida B. Wells Barnett to Malcolm X to Robert and Mabel Williams, subject of the book and the documentary Negroes with Guns. Their attitude was this nonviolent stuff will get you killed. And even the former Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, said that the problem with nonviolent direct action is that it requires your enemy to have a conscience, and Americans have no conscience. So people are not willing to be plunged into the abyss of despair, and they're going to fight. So, knuck if you buck. And some people about that action, boss, and they ready. Wouldn't want to see them. You hate to see it.
I also noticed, that the Proud Boys,
I hate to see what happens.
The Proud Boys never show up in Harlem. They never show up in Harlem. I never take the threat of civil war too seriously, because I seriously believe, like, look, in any war, the only people that lose are the people with something to lose, and I consider that to be the privilege of this country. I mean, if I'm gonna go to war over defending my skin color, well, I guess I have to, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like I'm not gonna fight. You come to intimidate my family and try to kill my family. I have no other choice but to fight back, because I can't turn white. I can't join another team, so I have no other choice. But again, the professor would have more historical reference on this than I would, but I would suggest that most wars are not started by the most privileged in a society, because again, they're the ones with the most to lose. You know what I'm saying? If there's a civil war in this country, there will be no white privilege. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, see, I'm not calling it a civil war though, man. I'm looking at this like, it's Tulsa, it's Rosewood, it's Chicago, it's Atlanta. It's these places where you have people.
I'm afraid that it will end up
right. And so that didn't escalate to the level of a civil war, but what it was an effort to intimidate people. You look at what was targeted, right? So they would say a black boy took a liberty with a white woman, or a black child crossed an imaginary swimming area separating black people from white people. But then you look at where they visited the devastation. They attacked black business districts and places of black political and economic power. Black success invites the mob, as Dr. Caretha Ann Mitchell likes to say. So I'm not talking about civil war. I'm talking about localized efforts at pushing people into their place. It's know your place aggression. And what we're also seeing then and now is that people aren't willing to accept that, right? So this doesn't escalate to the level of civil war, but it's things you see in communities. There was a place about a mile from our home where Trump supporters and Biden supporters got into a fist fight. There was a Trump parade that came through our neighborhood, and they got into a shouting match with one of my neighbors. And so, I went outside to check on him. This is a white guy from West Virginia who's a Democrat. I went outside to check on him, but I took hot sauce with me. Just to make sure. I'm not talking about a firearm, but I took hot sauce with me just to make sure, because this is kind of where we are. So I'm not talking about some 1861 type of thing. I'm talking about what we've seen in the past, where people try to exercise this know your place aggression, and they're trying to come at people's throats, and black people like, nah, man, miss me with that.
I believe in the power of black people's strength after years and years of oppression. And once again, we've been in situations where people were hanging us from trees before. You know what I'm saying? And they're not necessarily doing that now. But I would say that, if there's any group of people that are ready to be oppressed, it's us, because we're the ones that have gone through it the most. With that said, I know what white flight is, and it's hard for me to believe that the whites that flew are going to come back into Harlem just to beat us up or to try to intimidate us. Now, I know that there are groups out there, but I really believe in the power of black strength and black courage, and I just don't believe that we're the ones for that at this time. Now,
dude, they went into Detroit to tell people to stop counting black votes. Detroit is 79% black.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, they did.
Detroit 79% black. They ran up in Detroit like, y'all gonna stop counting these votes.
I believe that if they go into Detroit knuckling up, though, that those are fights that they will lose, though, because being in a situation where we've always had to fight has made us good at it. We had to run through states, man, with people chasing us with dogs. I'm not really afraid of white people like that. If they come with guns, I'm gonna get my own and defend myself. And I believe that every person in my situation would do the same thing. So I don't fear them for that. I went to vote in New York City, and if the Proud Boys were outside of my voting booth, I'd have went right through them. I'd have walked right through them, said, "Excuse me, sir," and voted. No one's gonna stop me from voting. So, and I know there are people that they will intimidate. I just don't fear that, and I don't fear that because I know what I'm fighting.
Confrontational settings.
Yeah,
right.
I mean, I had to fight. Look, when I got in law school, I got jumped by my friends.
South side of Queens. Like we wish that I wish somebody would. Like we
has Donald Trump ever been on fight
for the AU?
Got a gold nameplate.
What's up with your kicks? So one thing I had to teach my wife, who is not from those settings, is what the sneakers, when you see people sneakers up on the phone wire, what that was actually about. She had no idea. Yeah. And when I told her, she's like, "Oh," and the children are like, "Oh," I'm like, yeah.
So I kind of
streets is rough.
But it's okay.
No, I'm not saying that white people don't control the power structure and stuff. I just think we do have a friend in Joe Biden, and I do believe we have a guy now that's not going to be stoking white supremacy. I can't be convinced to accept white supremacy. I just can't. I don't mind dying for that. You know what I'm saying? And if I have to, I will. I believe that there are a lot of people like me.
Well, this is where we need
That's an excellent closing thought. Come on.
Yeah.
Doc, take us home.
I was just gonna say that we look at a lot of these conversations about racism, and it's like, well, what are black and brown people going to do about this, and what are black and brown people are going to do about that? These are not our problems to solve because we didn't create them, and we don't have the majority power to correct it all. That they're going to require majority minority coalitions if these things are going to be addressed. Those coalitions are hard to build, they're hard to maintain, and they're easily broken up because some people can't let go of that racism narcotic. So we're going to need something from a better generation of white folk. And if we look at those exit polls, Trump won just about every category of white voters that are out there to be had. So if you look at the gender gap, it's not really a gender gap, it's a racial gap, because these black women and Latinx women voted for the Democratic candidate, but white women voted for the Republican. You look at the seeming age gap, and Trump played Biden even with white voters between the ages of 18 and 29 years old. That age gap was driven by young people of color in that under 30 demographic, right? So we're going to need to see something better from white folk who are going to be different types of allies. You need allyship that looks like John Brown. You need some allyship that maybe might look like Joe Biden, who now at 78 years old with some experiences and having served 8 years with the black president, he seems like he's in a different place because he offered a full-throated public embrace of black voters and said, "You had my back and I'm going to have yours." And I'm like, okay, I want to see what you do now, because I wasn't expecting you to come out that hard tonight, but you did, and you did it in public. So that's the kind of stuff that you're going to need if you're going to see movement on these things, because black and brown people can't do it alone, because if they could, they would have solved this long before we were born, because people don't want to catch hell all the time.
Right.
Amen. Well, I want to thank both of you for being excellent, insightful guests, man. Great conversation. I'm sorry at the end. I never seen an hour go by that fast.
Yeah.
Thank you for inviting me. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks for the intelligent conversation from intelligent people, and we'll catch you all on the flip. Tune in next time.
Yes.
Meanwhile, be safe, be well, and we actually have a president here in the United States.
Yeah.
And he went to Syracuse. That's all I gotta say.
Good night, guys.